Hey, Tim.
Hey, Val.
Are you wondering why I dragged you onto this session?
Sure, let's pretend it's that spontaneous. Am I uncomfortable? Is this some navel gazing? But it's worked out on most things you have ideas on. So let's do it.
Well, because we all know how much you love celebrating, I wanted to wish you happy 1 year Facts and Feelings anniversary.
Ooh, oh, wow. Thank you.
Okay, let's just stop that cheering.
Yeah.
That's enough of that.
Ooh, that was, you could see the rash starting to break out. Yeah, that's good.
No, it's very
No.
exciting. Hitting the 1 year mark is a pretty big deal. So wanted to do a little bit of a reflection over the past year. But as we started to think about this, we realized a lot of facts and feelings ingredients in some of those early seeds that got planted. It's been a lot longer than 1 year, right? So let's take a little trip down memory lane and see how far back we can reach to find
I
some of these core delivery elements.
I feel like over the course of the last year, you had many more memories of kind of the pieces sort of falling into the place. So like I almost feel like part of the last year has been actually reconstructing the lineage, which I think we have determined kind of we can mark time of the group that is doing facts and feelings going back to 2012, which is kind of crazy. So should I do that little
Yeah,
recap of where I came up
the
with
little
2012?
origin story. Yeah.
The origin story. So sit back, get comfortable for the next hour and a half. So I mean, so what in this? I mean, maybe I think it's kind of interesting. I'm fascinated by it because I have realized how this has been a decade plus journey to get to what we're doing now. And in September of 2012, I joined a little CRO agency startup. I was one of the two day one employees called Clearhead, based out of Austin. I was already in Ohio, had been in Ohio for 5 years, but I'd gotten connected to Matty Wishnow, who, for those who are following Facts and Feelings, he is a absolute critical co-founder of Facts and Feelings. So that was back in 2012. I actually only stayed there for about 9 months for various reasons that we don't want to get into. But in the midst of that, like 6 months into that, 7 months, 8 months, there was an eMetrics conference, and I was actually, I believe, already knowing that I was leaving, but I had this presentation, and because Val can put her hands on everything, we could actually pull up that presentation from
Definitely have an archives channel here at Facts and
yeah.
Feelings.
So the name of this, so Maddie and I, and as well as Ryan and Melissa, the other people at Clearhead, had started doing a lot of kind of riffing of how could CRO be done better. And at that point, when you talk to Maddie, he talks about how there was all this kind of excitement of this is, there are ways to be using experimentation and testing better. I had this idea of kind of it's a little broader than just experimentation. So this was a little lower quality than it was at the time from a pixelation, but this was the Clearhead template. And even back then, I was talking about, let's talk about process in a different way. And I gave this presentation at eMetrics, and I had this adapt to act and learn. We do not need to go through all of those. This theory theme lasted for a while. It was still kind of theoretical, but I gave that theory of here's how I think things should be running. And it felt pretty solid. And I kind of unbeknownst to me, I didn't communicate how much that was kind of this was my idea of how I thought things should run, because there was one person, at least in the audience, probably only one, who thought, that's great. I've just taken over this new role, and this is the roadmap that I'm going to use. And turned out she didn't, it didn't work perfectly, but it was enough of a skeleton. It totally made sense to her. She went back to the role she had recently gotten into, and actually kind of tried to basically implement it and had to adjust it here and there along the way. But I think it was just a year later that that person was on stage at Metrics presenting, hey, here's what I did. And you may know at this point that that person was Val. So you want to insert your take on how that whole experience went?
Yeah, I remember being very lost when I was early in this role, understanding like how do I get Google Analytics installed across all these different websites? And I had a partner that was helping me with that. And so that part felt like, okay, solid. But I was like, but then now what? Now that I can demonstrate that the requirements have been implemented, the data is being collected, I was really struggling to like really find a really captive, active audience amongst all of the people I considered stakeholders for, can you believe all this new data we have collected? This is just going to set the world on fire, isn't it? And so really struggling with, especially with some of those partners, to connect with them and to understand how I could bring this to what mattered most to them. And so this was a major unlock for me. So this was a presentation on building a program from the ground up. It was focused a lot on experimentation too, but it also had like broader capabilities.
Can we see the
in there.
second slide? Can we see the second slide in that deck? This is like the...
this is like, let me let you know who you're dealing with here, was what this slide was.
In actual attire, you have changed quite a bit from a aura and persona. I feel like you've pretty much been the same since
consistency.
Young Val. Yeah.
No, this was great. And when I tell you that when I put together this deck, I thought this was like the best looking deck I had ever seen. And now I look back at it, I'm like, ooh, girl, like some of these choices. I love that it's also like the tighter aspect ratio, which is also a stamp of time. This was October 2014. But the slide that I'll draw your attention to, as I'm flipping through here, is the hypothesis library, which was a huge part of Adapt to Act and Learn with Tim Wilson himself with the no pie in the corner.
Yeah. So that is a memory I have. I don't know that I connected that was Val. I mean, I'm a little fuzzy, but I guess you showed up at that eMetrics, and I just remember this very excited, kind of maybe encroaching in my personal space a little more than I was comfortable. Person kind of bouncing up to me saying, I was at your presentation last June and I did it. And I was kind of floored as like, oh wait, like that was a night, like, really? You did it? Like, cool. Like, I'm going to come to your session and see how it went. I think you, is the fact that I now know the name of your therapist, and there's a tally of how many times I've come up, and that goes back to 2013.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because from my perspective, this is my first time ever speaking at a conference, which my therapist did dare me to do this presentation, which is why that came up. But when I checked in, they're like, okay, here's your badge, here's your book, here's your, remember back in the day when they had the book for all your passport sessions and the sponsors? Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
The whole agenda.
Oh, do I remember? I'm pretty sure you have some sitting on the shelves behind you.
I'm pretty sure I do.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe we'll insert photo of menu program. And so they're like, and here's the speakers lounge, and there's like, snacks and water. And I was like, ooh, snacks. And I was like, also a speakers lounge. Like, she's never heard of that. So I like walked in and Tim was the only person. I was like, whoo, like door closed. Cause I hadn't even thought about like, oh my God, like how audacious for me to say, hey, remember that thing that you keynoted last year? I'm going to present on how I did that and made some like changes. I'm like, this moment did not occur to me as potentially happening. So I was like, all right, well, I got to talk to him about it. But then when you said like, oh, I'll attend your session, I was like, oh no, like, what have I done? Like, what if he's like raised his hand and why would you make that choice? I was like terrified, but obviously you were very gracious as an audience member.
So, and I did feel very validated at that point that, okay, this was an idea. I had a lot of confidence in it. And and it's not like that adapt to act and learn that acronym has gone by the wayside. I feel like just in the interest of shared humility, perhaps I could show my Prezi phase, because it did come up for a while.
Don't worry. We all had a Prezi face, Tim. Don't be embarrassed.
Yeah, I blame John Lovett for this, but so that was basically the same presentation, taken into the horrifying zooming world of there was a whole MythBusters thing, but there were these ideas. Now I'm just remembering how disorienting. Val, are you still with us, or did you fall out of your chair from vertigo here?
A little dizzy.
Okay. I'm going to give up. But there are elements of the same way that even now, I'm going to find my way to it. We talk about, how do you measuring goals versus actually taking ideas and measuring them. Yeah, this is absolutely terrible. Okay,
I can't imagine navigating this from the stage, if I'm honest.
Well,
at least
impressed. That was just kind of a forward sort of
That's
click.
True.
So it wasn't it's trying to navigate around. But that stuck for a while. But I think I had some confidence coming out of that, this actually, this did work. In practice, it worked. The role I was in, I was still kind of back in the, set up my reports, be really knowledgeable about Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics. And I would bring the ideas to bear, but I didn't really have a chance to sort of fully implement it. So at that point, I was aware of you and you were aware of me and you were kind of getting involved in the DAA. And so you were kind of around and I felt like our paths crossed, but it wasn't until I'm going to blank on what year we wound up at the same company.
2018.
And by then, when I didn't get there much before you did, but when there was, Val Kroll's coming here. And at the time I was like, that's going to be awesome. She's going to join our experimentation team. I was on the analytics team. And then from there, in essence, we got to say, we've never actually tried to do this stuff together. We both had kind of learned things along the way, and we got to actually put the pieces of that process or the ideas. It wasn't really a defined process. It was like, these are the components. These are the things that need to happen in this order. And we got to actually do that together. So,
quick pause on that. I have to say, the first client that I was on was one with you, and my role wasn't as an experimentation director in that capacity on that client. So that gave us a chance on my first client, day one, log into your computer, sign up for insurance, and here's your first client. And that ended up being a client that we were both on for the duration of our time there, where we were able to even pressure test different concepts or way of facilitating conversations. I would say it even changed over time on that one client together over the years, wouldn't you say? Just perfecting some of the edges of it and the way that we use the vernacular. And so that was really cool experience.
And a lot of it was that foundation was still there. I guess in parallel, what happened to Clearhead? What happened to Matty Wishnow?
Where did we leave those characters?
Where did we leave that character? Matty went on to grow Clearhead to be, the largest independent CRO agency in the U.S. that led it through an acquisition. That at that point, he actually had to reach out to me because even in my 9 months, turns out I had some skin in that was very lucrative skin, turned out. So that was great. So he'd been so busy and heads down growing that agency that even when I would get to Austin, I occasionally would try to connect with him, but I kind of lost touch outside of then he called me and said, hey, by the way, big news happening in 2 days. And here's what you need to know. And please don't say anything, but you need to know X, Y, and Z and sign this paperwork. And then we still loosely stayed in touch. I then hit a point where I kind of needed a break. And so I literally just was like, I need to step away. I have an idea for a book. I've got a couple of my kids were hitting a phase in their late teens, early 20s where it would be useful for me to be available. So I just kind of stepped away with no plans whatsoever. And I had given notice, but I had not finished my time. It was normal. It was 2.5 weeks or something. And Matty reached out because he had written a book, and he said, "Hey, you know, the stuff we were working on back when you were at Clearhead," he's like, "you will recognize a lot of what is in this book from our time working there. I'd love to have you just kind of read it and, tell me what you think, and maybe, maybe give me a review on Amazon." So that book was called Listening for Growth, and it was very, very fair assessment that I could see that stuff that he and I had been working on actively back in 2012, 2013. It had kind of evolved. Same thing with you and with me. It was still at its core the same fundamental ideas. So Matty is among many, many other things, he is brilliant. And I read the book and I was like, wow, this is cool. It had some of those same initial kernels. It added some other stuff that was really unique and interesting. And hey, I had a podcast that I've been co-running for a while. And we actually, at that point, Val, you and Julie Hoyer had joined the show. And I was like, this would be a great discussion. Let's have Matty on the podcast to talk about it, because I thought this is actually really interesting and useful. And to say that your reaction to the book was enthusiastic is probably a little bit of an understatement.
I have never annotated a book and written as much oh my God, highlights, earmarks on both sides, taking pictures, sending it to you. It's this is so cool to see, because obviously I had seen Matty speak on stage at Opticons when he was CEO at Clearhead, and I had chatted with him, although I'm sure he would never remember. Back in the day, as a emerging CRO, just trying to learn what were some of the right practices in this space, but I had never seen it kind of all put together with some of your content. So when I read the book, it was no way, I had no idea that these connection points. That was pretty fun, because I was reading it in preparation for him coming on the podcast, because I was one of the co-hosts for that episode.
And it was interesting, even if we talked to him about writing the book, he said, this is, of all the stuff, yes, he was doing CRO and they were being very impactful, but what he says is that it was kind of the thinking and the alignment and the focus and real clarity on goals and what are the problems most worth solving, treating ideas, solutions as, validatable hypotheses. He said that's where, as they were getting big and had really large clients with really large contracts, he's like, that's what he kept hearing was most impactful. And then, they got acquired. And then the thing that happened when you get acquired, that sort of all kind of started to crumble. So it was kind of his outlet. I mean, Matty has many kind of passion side projects, things he needs to get out of his system that are kind of on their own, singularly once in a lifetime, brilliantly creative things. And I think the book, he just is well, but before I get onto this music thing or this baseball thing, I need to, knock this book out. So that did kind of bring us together. And I think that ultimately the details of kind of what happened, what I've realized over the last year is how much fun and how productive and how useful it is to saying, this is really it. Throughout my past roles, I've really felt like this is it, without, not the specific details, but a lot of the fundamentals. But it's kind of fighting uphill battles because somebody isn't on board with the focus and alignment and the deeply engaging with the business being really far and away more important than any specific data set or data integration or tool or wiring up of technology, even though there are all these forces kind of pushing for that. So I would say that for the last year, there's certainly getting to collaborate with you even more, but on top of that, really saying this is a gap in the way that organizations are trying to get value out of their research, analytics, and experimentation. And we're going to focus on just that. And if an organization comes to us and said, yeah, we want to do that, but can you first help us, implement this CDP? It's very easy for us to say, well, one, no, we're not CDP implementation people, but if we can't bring people along, so the clients that we have are so much on board with, they're like, yeah, we have been down the road of more data, more technology, in many cases throwing more analysts at it, and that's not getting us where we need to be. So it is kind of nice to be in that self-selecting world. So
yeah. And I think that some of my experiences, even in-house, before we were able to collaborate on some of this together, are just so formative in me understanding how impactful this work can be for some of my clients. I feel like it's given me an appreciation for what that feels like, because when I was at the American Medical Association doing this adapt to act and learn, the hypothesis library, we brainstormed with what we called the Digital Analytics Roundtable at the time, the DART, was helping us make the case to invest in technology because we didn't have a testing tool at the time. And 95 of those 100 ideas roughly were test ideas, but 5 of those ideas were things that we could actually use historical data for. And so I know it was always your intention that that would kind of be methodology agnostic, that it's not about the practice or what you're using to validate, but that was kind of how we started thinking about hypothesis-driven analysis and ways that we can be really flexible with the tools that we bring to bear to answer the questions that we have, and understanding that sometimes attitudinal data is actually more beneficial for the question we're trying to answer, or is the right level of risk, or is the right, time. So I think that being able to see some of that and doing that with you today with some of our clients has been super rewarding and super fun. And I just love seeing the change that people are able to observe, and the way that they felt so much pressure to deliver at Insights O'Clock at their monthly analytics readout session, and to be able to change and pivot to this hypothesis-driven approach where we're taking the questions from the business but transforming it into something that's really, really meaningful to drive decisions and action. So that's been amazing.
Which is another good point. Like, my blind spots, I definitely had grown up through analytics. I managed a BI team that had market research in it, never had really not done experimentation. So I had kind of what I learned about experimentation was really in those 9 months at Clearhead, where we were kind of trying to figure it out at the time. And that was kind of in the optimizely, just test everything. It's, WYSIWYG editor. There's that other piece that even that I don't feel like I realized until just a few years ago. Like, you came up through, started in market research, wound up in experimentation, and had digital analytics along the way. So that has also been like very fun and useful and validating, because even now the number of times where we're like, here's this hypothesis, how are we going to validate it? Could we do this with research? What would it be? And then you've got some vast bit of knowledge of the different techniques for that. So somehow, like, that kind of came together where our respective backgrounds in those 10 years that we didn't realize we were working together, but I guess those first 5 years or whatever, that we really were developing the complementary skills. But that makes it all sound pretty buttoned up and formal. I mean, let's be honest, like, we laugh a lot. So that's also been kind of a blast. Now that I know how to do this, the audio, you don't even know. So,
well, it's good stuff. Well, I guess I can just give a huge thanks to you, Tim, for this amazing year of Facts and Feelings. And I'm so excited about some of the things that we have on the horizon and some of the new ideas we have. And, giving you an opportunity to have some more R candy that you can sprinkle on to the way our network diagram is visualized to help support the reveal sessions for our clients. But it's been amazing. Thank you. And can't wait to see what we record at this time next year.
Right back at you. And I thought you promised me that I only had to do this gooey, nostalgic shit once every 5 years. What do you mean next year? No.
I think enough time will have passed. You'll have forgotten.
Okay. All right.
Bye,
Happy
Tim.
anniversary.